Hello. I'm going back in the series called State of the School. I'm going back a couple videos to say a little bit more about animals, as I suggested that I would, tweaking it. I made that rush to the end to make sure I could make it to the end because I was feeling so bad. Not feeling great yet, but I made it through the night, and I'm optimistic I'll make it through another night. Anyway. I'm so sorry. This will end one way or the other. About animals, I'm going to separate it into two videos because I see a division in the subject. First, my interest and how far back it goes, how academic it was, and I'm going to name names. Some of them you may well know. You see, in the 70s, in the 1960s, really, there were some books got very popular, maybe a little bit in the 50s, but in the 60s, about animals and about this whole idea of, do animals have minds? Do they have language? And wanting to know about animals and their society. Do they have societies? Do they have groups? That reminds me, there was a book I forgot to mention here called Men in Groups, which was of that time, which I had, but I lost a copy and it's really expensive now. Anyway, I'm going to name some of these. I'm not even going to use this list. I'll just see which ones I miss. Konrad Lorenz, I already mentioned him. He was Austrian. He's the one who wrote King Solomon's Ring, and he did an experiment with gray-lag geese, a kind of goose that lives in Austria, and found that they imprinted, I guess is the right word for it. I was thinking implanted. I think it was imprinted. When they hatched out, they saw him, and they imprinted on him as their mother. And from that time on, as they grew up, they followed him everywhere he went, in the house, out of the house. If he went swimming, they went swimming. They had imprinted in him. That's what he was most famous for, but a very entertaining writer, scientist. So Konrad Lorenz, King Solomon's Ring. Then there was a host of them, like Desmond Morris. I think he might have written one called The Naked Ape, meaning humans. There was Robert Ardrey. His famous book was African Genesis, from that time. I have all these on the shelf. I could have got down and just showed them all to you. On aggression, very good writer, not a scientist, admittedly not so. I mean, it was almost like a popular science at that time. There was a guy named Robin Fox. There's a name for you about a writer writing about animals. Did I mention the Naked Ape? Anyway, let's see. Desmond Morris. Okay, that's actually most of them. I'm probably missing some of them. But then in the 70s, it became scientific, this stuff. And it clearly had been going along all along, but people didn't really know much about it. But the landmark book about this, and I have it on the shelf too, is called Sociobiology, written by a guy named Wilson. O. Wilson, I think. Famous before that for his study of ants. I mean, it's that thick. It's so scholarly, and I decided I'm going to read it all. Well, I got through about 50 pages of it, reading it, and I crashed, although I looked through it and studied it all. There was that, and the other science that developed in the 1970s, which we all take for granted now, is ecology. That was kind of a new word. And the two names there were Howard and his brother, Eugene Odum. I get the two of them mixed up, O-D-U-M, Odum. They're kind of like the father of that science of ecology. I followed this so close all the way through that time, but it's as it relates to the animals is why I'm mentioning it. Also, there was a lot of interest in whether or not animals had language. And that was one of the key things that people wrote about scientifically too. studies about chimpanzees. What was the name of that one that had 500 signs? Lucy, maybe, that she could use. And so it's been studied a lot. I wanted to mention them. I don't go back to these books very often, but now it's just part of modern culture. I mean, before that, the idea that animals might have some kind of language, you didn't even dare suggest that because that was regarded as sort of absurd in the 1950s. But now, fortunately, we know much better. Well, I've got one other half of this animal subject to talk about next time. Bye.